All right. I'm so excited. We have Maya Gobara joining us. And, I've not met you that long ago in this journey. I have been going through some major transformations, but your voice landed in my life in the most perfect moment that not only do you have this beautiful, sweet, gentle voice, not only your voice, but the way you show up in the world is so beautifully gentle. And I heard about this work. You called it the anxious entrepreneur.
Yeah, the
And
anxious entrepreneur.
yeah, and it landed in my life at this exact right moment where I was thinking, how do I start translating all this good work I have done in my life for the personal pieces of me that had been neglected and so on? How do I translate that to positive messages that aren't covered with white supremacy nonsense, spiritual bypass, right? That real grounded statements like affirmations, meditations. And I really like that your focus is, let me do 5-minute meditations instead of these like hour-long things that we could be doing. I really liked that it's just bite size. It's something that we can ground into daily. And I fell in love with that. And I'm still listening to those audios,
Awesome.
I love that. So I want to I know I just gushed about you, but why don't we just take a step back and for you to introduce yourself to our audience?
Hello, everybody. I am Maya Gobara. I am a spiritual teacher. I offer meditations. Some people call me a spiritual mentor, spiritual healer, whatever it is. There's so many labels out here. I'm like, I'm just kind of doing the work and doing my work, and that transforms and morphs over time. But primarily right now, my focus has been more of the meditative focus and more of going within and asking ourselves kind of like that hard question. So it's kind of like a mix of meditation and shadow work and stuff like that. So that's kind of where I am at now. And I've been doing this for about 7-8 years now.
That's amazing. And you're so good at it. I think that's one of the things that other people I've heard talking about you is just your sweet voice and sweet spirit. So I think we need that kind of grounding to do this work, really. One of the things you just talked about now is archetypes and how we can use this in spirituality. That's one of the things we're going to talk about. First of all, before we dive into this, what is an archetype and how can we use it?
So basically, the archetype is like this universally understood symbol or term or pattern of behavior. I would say like it's more patterns of behavior. We often see them in myths and storytelling across different cultures. So you'll see the Cinderella archetype, you'll see the evil stepmother archetype. It's these patterns of behavior that we see imprinted upon people over and over and over again, and they can change via culture, but normally they kind of go across different cultures, and we'll see them over and over again. And Carl Jung is someone whose work that I really, really like. And he is a Swiss psychologist. And it's basically, he identifies it as like this inborn models of people and behavior and personalities that play a role in influencing human behavior. He suggests that the archetypes were archaic forms of innate human knowledge passed down from our ancestors. And so it's said that sometimes these traits and these archetypes are passed down from our ancestors to us, which is why people would say, "Oh my God, you act just like your grandmother," even if you've never even met her before. It's just these personality traits that we tend to just have innately.
Mm-hmm. And how does understanding that help us with grounding, with spirituality, with meeting our kind of vision or our goals in the world?
I think that when I got into archetypes, I began to understand myself better. And a lot of the things that I used to get so sometimes angry at myself for, or I would be very hard on myself for some of these personality types or personality traits. And I realized that one, there's nothing new under the sun. I'm not the only person that's like this. And two, that's okay. And that now I have this framework to be able to see the light side of this personality trait. And then I also have the tools to see the shadow part of this personality trait. And I can be able to work through it. Now I know what questions to be able to ask myself, what things I need to look out for, and how I can be able to change and transform, and doing all of this without guilt. Mm-hmm. Which I think is like a really, really important piece. So, I'm not beating myself up for, like, people talk about my sweet spirit now, but had this been maybe 10 years ago, probably not so. Shoot, 5 years ago, probably not so. And so I've been able to morph and transform into someone that I want to become. And I've been able to do that without a lot of guilt. And that's allowed me to be able to do it, I would say, with ease. Mm-hmm. Yeah. With ease. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love that. And these archetypes are things we can maybe identify with people. I mean, I've used less archetypes personally and used a lot of animal energy because I get animals visiting in my dream state. So I feel like they show up in my life a lot, or even insects when I have a lot of bug energy in my life. So they're telling us messages, good or bad, like you're saying, shadow or so on. So we can use these. And I love that you picked 3 archetypes for us to dive into today that would be really helpful on our journey. You want to share a little bit?
Yes, so we'll be talking about the child, we'll be talking about the caretaker, and we'll be talking about the elder. Mm-hmm. So these are the 3 that we'll be diving into today. I feel like they really get to the core of the different phases mm-hmm. that we encounter throughout life. And that we encounter throughout life, no matter how old we are, because even if we're a child, we are encountering the caretaker, whether the light side or the shadow side, right? Or the elder, whether the light side or the shadow side. And so, these are archetypes that all of us, I feel like, will encounter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, you mentioned, how do we access the child, the caregiver, or the elder inside us?
So I use different forms because I feel like we all learn differently. Mm-hmm. And so we all get there in different ways. So they can be music, meditation, journaling, different yoga poses, being able to ask yourself specific questions to get to the core, and meditation. I don't know if I said that already, but yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So for the child archetype, how would we identify that? Like, what are some characteristics from the shadow or from the kind of more positive aspects?
So when we're talking about the child, we're talking about this innocence, this inherent innocence that we all have, which I think is really beautiful. And around that time, it's when we are formed, it's the lens in which we view the world. And a lot of times we still carry that lens with us throughout life, whether it be the positive or the negative. But the truth is that in the beginning, that lens was very, very innocent. And we get to go back to that lens, and we get to really go within and talk to the child within us and say, hey, who did you want to be? Mm-hmm. How did you view the world? Who are you now? What messages do you have for me now? How far am I from who I wanted to be to who I am now? And getting to the core of what do you really want? The child will really be able to answer those questions for you.
That's so good, especially when we're thinking about what we dreamed we might be doing, because that's a question we get in childhood quite a lot, right? What do you want to do? How do you want to change the world? Remembering that piece of our vision is so important.
Yeah, and I find that for me, I always had the hardest time answering that question. Like, who do you want to be? Who do you want to be? And I would just answer like, I want to be a doctor. I want to, because that's what my mom, she just told me that she wanted me to be, and you get inundated with all of this stuff. But I knew that at the end of the day, as a kid, I didn't know exactly who I wanted to be as far as, and that's another thing. When they say, who do you want to be? It's always connected to capitalism, right? What profession do you,
Yes.
and that's who you are. But I knew I wanted to be happy.
Mhm.
And that really got to the core of what I wanted. I knew how I wanted to feel as an adult. And once I was able to really answer those questions, like, well, are you happy? Are you feeling joy?
Mhm.
The joy that you thought that you would feel as an adult. And at that point, the answer was no. So it's like, okay, so how can we get closer to that childlike wonder and joy, or the child's version of the happiness that you thought that you would be able to experience? Because we like to write it off as if it's unrealistic, but I don't think it is.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of those simple childhood joys would be so good for us to embrace now. I've
Mm-hmm.
recently picked up jump roping, which I really love to do. And I'm like, so I bought myself a jump rope and I want to be doing that this month, because it's just fun to be jumping and moving like that. So, I don't think they have to be complex kinds of asks that might come from our childhood, right? To embrace that fun and joy.
I agree. I randomly bought a harp like a year and a half ago. And
Mm.
people are like, what are you doing? I was like, I've always wanted to learn an instrument. I always thought the harp was pretty. I always liked the sounds that came from it. I thought it was a beautiful instrument. And you know what? I'm going to learn how to play the harp. And people
Wow.
were just like, whoa, it's like, it was this childlike thing. And it just did it for me. And like, am I good enough to play concerts? No. But can I soothe myself? And can I play something that sounds good to me, that's really melodic, that calms me, that soothes me, that eases me? Yes. And it
Mhm.
really feeds into that childlike joy. And I love it.
Mm. I love that. Thank you. That's something we can really dive into as we're trying to come, because so many people right now are feeling overwhelmed and exhausted, and they still want to do something good, right? We're seeing
Mm-hmm.
there's just right there's massive strike action going on around the world. There's solidarity movements. We want to be part of something good. We really want to change the world, and yet we're so exhausted. These are small things we can do to nourish ourselves in all of that.
Yes. And that's so important.
Mhm. Yeah. Let's move on to the next archetype. You said the caregiver. How can we notice the traits of the caregiver?
The caregiver is, how are you, because at this point I'm talking about the internal caregiver. So how are you taking care of yourself? Um, how are you contributing to your own well-being and making sure, like, how are you keeping yourself safe? And I talk about this a lot, about how I used to practice a lot of self-abandonment.
Mm.
And I realized that my inner caretaker was not, it was operating in the shadow side, where I was abandoning myself in a lot of situations. And I just kind of left my inner child out there to the wolves. And I wanted to blame everyone else, but I couldn't, at that time, I couldn't see how it was self-abandonment, whereas I wanted to point the finger at everybody else.
Mm.
Um, and so I lead people to ask the question of, what versions of you do you need to release in order to be able to take care of yourself properly? And also, how has trying to be someone that you're not, or how is trying to be someone that isn't that authentic, childlike, joyful self, been damaging to you or your well-being? And in what ways can you show up for yourself?
Mm.
And of course, asking yourself, like, well, what does your inner mother or inner caretaker have to say to you? Like, what does your inner caretaker have to say for you? What messages do they have for you? And I think just asking yourself that question can help. And of course, asking yourself those questions after, like, going into a meditative state or listening to music that really uplifts you and empowers you. Like, what kind of music makes you feel like this, like, warm hug, and really getting into that kind of stuff. It can be fun.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you're not talking about caretaking for other people, because I was like, oh no, I do so much caretaking. And I think many of the people in our audience are doing a lot of care work in different ways. I love that you're having that directed towards how can we nourish and caretake for ourselves? What are the messages coming up that say that lead us back to home, lead us back to taking care of ourselves? Like you said, that warm hug feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I could feel that. I really want, I think afterward, I want to re-listen to what you just shared and journal about those prompts, because I think that's something, there's a lot of wisdom that we can glean about what are our needs right now, because I think a lot of people are running from task to task, overwhelmed, trying to do everything, and then there's not place to listen to those directions, not directions that sound so formal, but the prompts, the longings that might be coming out.
Yeah, and I liken it to, I would, when it comes to my caretakers, from the outside looking in, like, there were times where, because I am neurodiverse, and my neurodiverse, my autism and my ADHD and stuff like that, it wasn't caught until I was an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And there were times where my life would just go haywire as a kid. And I'm talking about academically. And when my caretaker just came in and was just like, okay, this is what needs to be done, and just completely mapped out everything that I was supposed to be doing from A to Z. And from the outside looking in, people thought it was controlling, but I felt relief. It's like, yes, I'm being parented. Thank you. Like, help me. And now I find myself having to do those things for myself. And when my life is going haywire, not just abandoning myself and throwing my hands up and say, oh, there's nothing I can do. Like, really sitting down with myself and say, okay, what is it that you need? And what does this look like?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter how it looks like from the outside. Like, I need to be able to assess my own needs and to be able to give myself those things no matter what society says.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've just addressed two of the things: abandonment, which I certainly can relate to as someone with complex trauma, abandoning myself over and over. So it's something that we can look at. And then also, like you said, getting a diagnosis later in life, chronic illness or neurodivergence or so on, then we don't know how to do those things. Like, we've had ill adaptive coping mechanisms perhaps, and now I'm in the similar situation of, oh, I somehow made it this far, but wouldn't it be nice to actually set things up in such a way that supports me, nourishes me, stop taking on these kinds of jobs, not just specific work jobs, but life choices,
Yes.
business choices that nourish me, that actually I'm excited about, instead of getting myself into a position where I'm overworking again.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. This so good. The last one was the elder. Tell us about that archetype.
This is where, like, your inner wisdom. I say this is the version of you that I don't know how you are about cursing,
Yeah,
but
it's okay. It's fine with me.
okay. This is the version of you that, it's very nurturing, but it also is the giver of zero fucks. If you've seen elders, they say what they want to say, they do what they want to do, because they know that at the end of the day, they know what's important and then what's not important. And so I say, ask yourself, what does your inner elder want for you? And what does your most embodied self have to say about the life that you are living now? Are you really prioritizing what's important and what's not important? So where's your inner wisdom?
Yeah, I love that. Another question that seems kind of to dovetail with what you're saying is thinking about legacy, in terms of what am I going to pass on to my child, or the legacy of my work and so on. That feels like a question that our elder self can help us look at as well.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah, I love this. I know we can talk forever. And we've already spent a lot of time talking about this. This is why I love your wisdom. It's so grounded in that you've taken this framework, but you've made it really, I feel like, more accessible and more inclusive, right? Not culturally appropriative in some way. So I love that. As we're wrapping up here, what would you like to, what's a thing that we didn't get to cover that you think people should know about you and your work, or about this work?
Um, my work, I consider to be, it's funny, the only word that I can really think of is like collaborative.
Mhm.
It pulls from multiple parts of life, of teachings, of lessons. And I say that it is a work that I have pulled and that I share, and that I ask that if anything ever like pulls at your heartstrings, or that any of this clicks for you or makes sense for you, please, please, please use it.
Mhm. Yes.
And like, please use it. There's one thing I believe in, like intellectual property and all of that stuff, but I also believe in community learning and community sharing. And so if any of this ever like tugs at you a little bit, or it resonates with you, please share it with your people. You won't find me stalking you or getting offended about it or anything like that. I'm not that kind of person.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I have, in the words of Desiree Attaway, right? Let's get free together. This is how we start to
Please.
free each other, right? Because we
Mhm.
share what's working and supportive to us. And that's why I'm doing this whole event, to help people have that kind of, build that foundation for themselves so they can go on to do more of the great work they want to put out in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they wanted to, get to know you a bit better?
I am a Facebook girl. So you all can find me on Facebook, Maya Gobara. And I am on Instagram under Maya Gobara as well. If you ever have any questions for me, you can reach out to me at hello@mayatthemystic.com.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Maya.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this.